Welcome to the Comic Sauce Podcast, where we talk comics and comics culture. I am Henry Liu, and today I am once again joined by Christian Diadamo. Christian, how are you doing?
Doing well, Henry. Happy to be here.
Right on. We are joined by the man known as Rainier. Rainier, how are you?
What's up, guys? I'm good. Summertime's here.
Summer. Yes, indeed. Today is May 27th, 2021, and we're going to talk about the animated TV show Invincible, the much talked about animated TV show Invincible. But first, quick FYI, the Comic Sauce Podcast is now on social media, so you can check us out at Comic Sauce Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And yeah, let's dive right into it. Invincible. This show is based on an Image Comics series of the same name, created by writer Robert Kirkman and artists Corey Walker and Ryan Otley. So yeah, this show has been much talked about as of late. What I thought we could start with is how did it come to be that you saw this show? Where did you first hear about it, and then how did you come to see it? What was your experience in getting introduced to this show? How about you start with this one, Rainier?
I saw the news headlines early that they were in the works to do a Invincible animated series, and I'm glad it came to fruition. I feel like Robert Kirkman has had a lot of success with a lot of his, creator-owned projects.
Yeah,
and he's got. I don't want to say big shoes to fill, but I feel like there's an expectation considering the success of the Walking Dead comic, the Walking Dead TV show. It's like, oh, what's he going to do next? Right. And yeah, I think this show delivered.
So, did you see the show as they aired, or did you watch it subsequently? Did you
Oh,
binge
yeah.
it? How did that go?
I caught it. I think I caught it a little late. I started when they had already aired the third episode. So I went into the show actually not knowing a whole lot about it. And it's interesting, the bait and switch that we're given, where we're diving into this right now, right?
Yeah, let's give a spoiler alert for Invincible. Go ahead.
I mean, it starts off as a colorful animated superhero show. There's explicit language, so you know that there's going to be some amount of adult content, but it opens up very bright and poppy, just kind of like your generic superhero show. And then it isn't until the end where you see the show open up with just this gratuitous murder of a superhero team.
Yeah.
By the hands of like the guy that you would least suspect to be the one that's going to like murder his own team.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, or it's funny, like when I was watching the show, my wife, she walked in as the credits were airing, and my mouth would fell to the floor. And she was like, "What are you watching?"
Nice.
And I'm like, "You got to see the show." It's not for the faint of heart. Definitely don't watch it with your kids.
Amen to that. Okay, how about you, Christian? How were you introduced to this show?
All right. So I've never actually picked up that much of Image before. I think I've read a little bit of Spawn and Walking Dead here and there, but I've never been that into Image. So this show just started to get a lot of buzz. And it was like that show, yeah, that new show that everyone was talking about when it started airing. And that's kind of how I picked it up. I think after we were having a conversation, the three of us, and Porfirio, after an episode, and I think Rainier, you actually said, you guys got to watch Invincible. Like, and you seem so enthusiastic about it, and like I heard a lot of it from just around the internet and all that. So I just kind of checked it out, like completely blind, 100% blind, not really knowing what I was getting into. And like first episode, you're like, this is all right. And then just that bait and switch after the credits, and you're like, this is wow, holy shit.
Yep.
Oh man. And I think I started around episode 4 or 5, I think is when I like picked it up. And then just like continued with the rest of the airing, watching it like right as it came out.
Oh, nice. So you kind of caught up and then were able to finish the series like in real time, essentially. That's cool. Yeah, man.
It's really unique. Like you don't see. I mean, there's a bucket load full of like animated comic book series that are out there, but you don't see them to the hard R degree that Invincible goes to. I mean, you have like, you have Justice League, you have Batman the animated series, there's a ton of them out there. I mean, there's a million like Spider-Man animated like movies and series, right? But they don't get as detailed as they do with like the amount of blood and guts you see that gets splattered on screen here. In fact, the title screen I feel like is very telling. I don't know if you guys noticed, but like, how they play the word Invincible into the title screen?
Yeah.
The title screen gets bloodier as the show continues. Did you guys notice that?
Oh no.
Yeah, I did. Like with each new episode, there's a new blood splatter that goes onto the screen.
And by the end, it's like completely red.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Didn't catch that. Nice. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that this is the most violent animated show I've ever seen. Yeah, we can get into the violence a little more later, but real quick, just my experience. Yeah, compared to me, you guys are way early adopters because I feel like I came to this really late in the game. Basically, every cool comics person I know, including you guys, were telling me that like you gotta watch the show. You just watch the show, man. It's amazing. You won't believe what you're gonna see, right? So yeah, it was one of those things. I mean, call it peer pressure or just the water cooler factor or whatever, but I just figured I have to see this at some point. So I did. In fact, just this past week, I watched it and I pretty much binged the season in like a few days. So it's pretty fresh in my mind. And yeah, it's pretty shocking, like it didn't disappoint on that front. Like, folks were pretty good about not spoiling plot points and that sort of thing to me. But the consensus was like, you're not going to believe what you're going to see. You're not going to believe like the level of violence, that sort of thing. And yeah, it's true. It's all the legends are true. I was shocked.
And it's not just limited to like the violent factor. Like there's like, there's there's explicit language, there's sex, there's everything that you would imagine that could be in the real life of like these superheroes that like have like problems. Like they really show that to the full extent.
Yeah. It's an adult TV show in every sense, basically, right? Okay, so let's get into the violence. I mean, that's like the headline for this show, the level of violence. Now, we sort of alluded to it, but the animation style in this show is almost like at odds with the level of violence, right? It's this kind of cool old school 2D animation. It kind of reminds me of when I was a kid, in the afternoons after school, watching like G.I. Joe or Transformers and stuff. So it just made the violence that more shocking, right? Because I felt like a kid watching this animation style, but then to be subject to all the blood and the guts and the gore, it was pretty hard to take. It was a shock to the system, right? So what do you guys think about the level of violence? Do you think it was too much? Do you think it was gratuitous? Do you think it was appropriate? What do you think? How about you, Christian? What do you think here?
It's definitely hyper violent. I will say though, I don't think it was gratuitous. I don't think it was too much like I guess going back to say like Mortal Kombat. We were talking about Mortal Kombat, and I would call that like gratuitous violence. Of course, Mortal Kombat should be gratuitous with its fatalities, and when you watch the fatalities, but there definitely is a shock factor to Invincible when Invincible just gets beat up and it's extremely bloody, and the characters really react to it and have like these very visceral reactions, and it's supposed to either shock the audience or shock us with the violence, as well as kind of show like something, I guess it's not realistic, but it is kind of realistic. And when I say realistic, it's just like when you punch, like the other characters can feel it. You can see when Omni Man punches somebody, they get knocked back and they get pretty bloody. Whereas when you watch a lot of other superhero shows, say like Superman the animated series, Superman will do a very similar punch, just get back up with no blood. In a way, where this goes all the way and shows you in very gory detail like what the power level of these characters are. And especially going into the last episode, I think it's meant to be over the top and shocking as much as it can be to really kind of drive the point home of who Omni Man is and what Mark is up against. So that's what I think. Violence gets double thumbs up for me.
There you go. And just for context, now Christian, I know you're a bit of a fan of this genre, like violent animation,
yes.
right?
Yeah, this is like right up my alley. I love really, really violent adult animation. And so like I part of me is also like kind of used to this in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from like Castlevania, which I also just finished up, and shows like Attack on Titan, and so this was great. This is exactly what I was looking for.
There you go. I mean, I think that context is important, just because like I'm not very used to seeing these kind of images.
But I was still like pretty shocked at what I was seeing. Like there were some scenes that were straight up gruesome.
Mm-hmm. All right, how about you, Rainier?
That brings an interesting point. Like when it comes to comic book violence, like I think we very much romanticize the idea of what a fight is supposed to look like. I think we're conditioned to see fights where they're choreographed and they look pretty with like a balance of brutality. But like if you watch a UFC fight, it's nothing but violent, Yep. And like a street fight, like someone's gonna break a nose, someone's gonna get a bloody knuckle. Like now you enhance these fights with superpowers. I mean, you're gonna get heads like literally rolling, and you're gonna see guts and bones broken. Like that's, I mean, if Superman were to punch a normal dude at full strength in real life, I mean, come on. And the velocity of that punch is going to go right through that person's stomach, you know what I mean? And like I think that's what they're showing here, that like human life is fragile, which really drives the point home with how the what's that alien race that they're from, what's it called?
Viltrum.
Oh, Viltrum.
Yeah,
Viltrumites. Like how we find out in the end, he's just like, they're just meat puppets. Like they mean nothing to me. And like look at how fragile their lives are. Like they're just bugs that you can squash with your boot, And I think that's that message married with like the animation style of the violence that they showed. Like I think that's where it's coming from.
Yeah. No question, it's a violent show. I did struggle a bit thinking over like, did it need to be this violent? And I don't know, I kind of feel it didn't need to be this violent. Like I felt there was a factor of wanting to shock the audience. Like they were specifically wanting to shock the audience. And from that perspective, I feel it is a bit gratuitous. They were being violent for the sake of shock value, right? And to get their message across, to tell the story they wanted to tell, I felt like it didn't need to be quite that violent. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting soft in my old age or something, but I just
Did you feel the
found
same way? Did you feel the same way with like Walking Dead?
no, I've never felt that the TV show Walking Dead was too violent. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's something
Really?
about this show that it was hard to take.
I wonder if it's the way the animation, like what you mentioned earlier, the way the animation was delivered to you. Like your brain
Yeah,
was thinking one thing, and then when they showed you something different, like it completely conflicted.
I think that's it. I think it's like that juxtaposition, right? Like literally like the last thing I watched with this animation style was like Pokemon I Choose You. You know, like I mean shit, like you talk about a completely different thing. So yeah, just the shock value of seeing that animation style with this level of violence, right? It
No,
was just tough.
I feel like Walking Dead is equally, if not more, violent. But I think the thing is that like we're brought into that world from like a very gritty place, so we expect it
Yeah.
to be very dirty and like gruesome from the get-go.
That's it. Like when you watch an episode of The Walking Dead, you're thrown into that world. It's a live action show. It's like kind of dimly lit. There's a lot of grays in it, and it's just kind of a dark feel from the beginning, right? It's not this bright, colorful show that Invincible is, right? So yeah, it's a shock to the system for sure.
I think the brutality of the violence on there. I don't think that was like the award-winning factor. Like I don't think that's what kept me around. Like I thought the characters were really interesting. Invincible himself, the dynamic with his father and his mother. I feel like the violence was, I mean, I don't want to say like the icing on the cake, but it was really cool to see them go there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like what gets the headlines is the violence, and what everyone's talking about is the level of violence. But yeah, I think the real reason why people watch the show all the way through and why a lot of people enjoy the show a lot is more the characters in the story, right? So yeah, maybe let's get into that a bit. Some of the highlights of the show. um yeah, so there are a lot of characters in the show, a lot of characters, and they are voiced by an amazing voice cast. I cannot believe the voice cast on this show. It's filled with stars and like prominent people. A lot of cool actors are doing voices. Yeah, we brought up Walking Dead, and we're talking about like close to the entire cast of The Walking Dead are like doing voices on the show in some degree. Stephen Yun is the lead of the show, um, but all throughout, sprinkled throughout, there are a lot of like Walking Dead alums who pop up here. And that's not it. I mean, you just go down the list. It's pretty amazing. I don't think we have time to go through the whole thing, but it's a very high profile voice cast, and that's pretty awesome. You know, that's pretty cool. And so yeah, you mentioned the characters, right, Rainier? Like, who are some of your favorite characters on the show?
I mean, Mark and his father, that whole family dynamic was, I mean, that was the center of the story. That was interesting. It was, I'm sure, Christian, you probably saw this very early on when they were showing Mark. Like he seemed like Terry McGinnis to me, like that.
Oh yeah.
He's the young gun and um, not totally sure of himself, and he comes into this place of like potential power, and he like grows into it.
Mhm. The character I thought of, although I think Invincible came first, was Superman's son, John Kent. because you think of Omni Man, it's like, oh, that's like this world's Superman, and like how he kind of passes down his moveset to his son John, um,
It
and so
did take me.
that was my first thought actually.
It did take me a minute to try. I had to disassociate uh, J. Jonah Jameson's character from what's his name's voice.
Of J.K.
J.K.
Simmons.
Yeah. I
Simmons.
had to. I
Yeah.
had to disassociate that for a bit, like every time the episode started, and then the
Yeah.
moment I could get that out of my head, okay, he's Omni Man now.
Okay, let's talk about J.K. Simmons a little bit, because the character Omni Man, who is a very prominent character in this show, I mean, he's essentially the second lead of the show. He has the powers of Superman, basically. He is like extremely brutal, as we come to find out. The real weird thing, though, is he has the powers of Superman. He essentially the body and costume of Superman as well, but his face and his voice are J. Jonah Jameson, right? Like, what the fuck? Like that tripped me out for the whole season, right? It's like Superman with J. Jonah Jameson's face and voice, and we're talking about the exact same actor who played J. Jonah Jameson in all three Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, and he was at the end of Far From Home also, right? So he is synonymous with J. Jonah Jameson, right? So yeah, just a total head trip, right? Yeah, this character is just wild. I mean, I can't even really begin to explain like the trip I went through this character Omni Man, right?
Oh yeah,
Right.
lots of dimensions to that guy, because it's like, you see him in the first episode killing his entire team, yet he's like this great father to his son. He's a great husband to his wife, and so like the entire series up until the reveal is brought up, I'm trying to think, maybe he did it for a good reason. Is that possible? Like that's the thing I was tripping over. Clearly, there was no, and it wasn't. It was good for him, but it wasn't good
Yeah.
for anyone else.
Yeah, there was really no redemption for him in the end. Interesting though, like those questions did come up, like, and we're kind of jumping to the end a bit, but at the end, ultimately he didn't kill his son. So I guess he kind of proved he had some feelings after all. But yeah, you never really got the explanation of, or a satisfying explanation as to why he was like this mass murderer, right? And you just kind of have to live with that. You're kind of stuck with that. It's a trip.
Mm-hmm. Like, I actually thought, like, could he be mind controlled? Was that really him? Like, I had all these different, like, kind of theories, but eventually, yeah, I guess going off the Superman analogy, it turns out Omni Man wasn't Superman. He was more like General Zod, and that was the
Yeah,
big twist. Was that he thought his
yeah,
dad was Superman, but really his dad's General Zod.
yeah. That was interesting because even the characters on the show were asking that. They were like, he had to have been mind controlled or something. Like he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't. Even his own family couldn't believe it, right? And then in the end, yeah, he wasn't mind controlled. He was doing this all on his own. So yeah, ultimately a very evil character, right?
What do you guys think of the teen team, the clear playoff of the Teen Titans?
I like their like arc and how they like have to become this new Justice League or Guardians of the Globe,
Right.
but they're not very good at their jobs and like they fight a lot and but like in their big fight against the let's see, like that mob boss, and he
Yeah.
has that like intergalactic like cat beast. Um, I forget their names, but they all just get completely wrecked, and I legit thought like one or two of them was like straight up dead.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like,
Same.
like because that was such a brutal fight, and they just get their asses handed to them.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a pretty interesting subplot. The evolution of this, young group of superheroes, right? They start off, you know, kind of all over the place. They didn't really know how to work as a team that well. Well, I should say, I guess when they were a teen team, they actually worked pretty well. But when they were like promoted to be the new Guardians of the Globe, that's when they were kind of all over the place, right? And it wasn't until the end of the season where they kind of got their act together. Yeah, that villain team was kind of interesting. It had uh, that character Titan, right, who really seemed to be a take on Luke Cage, right? He's like this black guy who is invulnerable. And in a move very similar to the end of the Netflix Luke Cage series, he becomes like a mob boss, right? And he turns out to be like a bad guy. But yeah, I was pretty surprising. I did not expect the superheroes to get beaten so brutally in that scene. I thought that was going to be their moment to sort of like show their worth, right? But yeah, they got beat down. Yeah, man, there's so many. I just watched the show, but yeah, there's so many like kind of crazy moments throughout the season. You know what I thought we could go to next is just kind of the shout outs and homages and references to other superhero properties. And we've kind of delved into it a little bit already, but I found this show to be like chock full of references, right? So they were really going for modeling their characters after these like really well-known superhero archetypes, right? So we mentioned Omni Man is like clearly based on Superman. This Titan guy is like a Luke Cage type. Like, what else do we got? I feel like there's just a ton of them, right? There's like a shrinking hero, a la Adam / Ant-Man. There's a super fast hero, Red Rush, right? Clearly a Flash / Quicksilver type, right? I mean, there's so many. There's a Batman character. I guess his name is Darkwing, right? Pretty cool.
How about that devil guy? I think he was a play off of like if Hellboy and Constantine had a baby.
Oh yeah. Oh, some serious Hellboy vibes from that dude. And yeah, Constantine as well, of course. Yeah. There's everything is in reference to something else on this show, which is kind of cool.
That one guy, the guy with the scar on his face that worked for the government, did he give you like Nick? Did he give you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he give you Nick Fury vibes?
Oh yeah.
They could teleport. Nick Fury that could teleport basically.
Yep. And that whole organization was like kind of like Shield, right? Definitely had that feel to it.
Where do you think where do you think Seth Rogen's character was drawn from?
Oh, the alien dude.
Rogen? Oh, was that the alien that Mark fought?
Yeah,
talked to at the end.
Like every year he would have like a fight with him. Like,
I wonder if that was just a play on like the trope of just like returning villains. And he thought like, like I just want a returning villain that like doesn't actually know like what he's doing. He just kind of shows up to fight, thinking he's like, didn't he think he was like going to a different planet or something?
Right. Yeah, I got that when they were sitting on the moon, like talking together. I was getting like Dr. Manhattan vibes.
Oh, huh.
Oh yeah. I'm telling you, every little thing in the show feels like a reference to some past superhero thing. You know, a couple others I noticed. Omni Man mentions like throwing shit into outer space. That's like totally a Superman thing, right? It's like kind of a joke, right? Viltrum, Omni Man's home planet. The origin story behind this like mass colonization of the universe by Viltrumites is that planet Viltrum is half wiped out. Exactly half the population is eliminated. That sound familiar? It's a total Thanos thing, right? So I'm sure we're just like scratching the surface in terms of like comic reference stuff. On this level, like the show's a big treat for comics fans, right? There's so much we can like reference to. That's pretty
Speaking
cool.
of like we were talking about space, did you like the explanation of how like when Mark asked Omni Man about like how do you breathe in space? And his father was just like, you don't.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Such a simple explanation. So he basically held his breath. Well, let's see, most of the time when he was like shot out to Mars with that team. Oh no, he had a helmet, didn't he?
That's right. He had a helmet
Oh,
at
yeah.
some point, but I do remember him in space without a helmet. And yeah, he did have to hold his breath. So
You're super in every way, which means holding your breath as well.
there you go.
Oh, I thought of another character that I would say another great performance was Sandra Oh's character, the mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
she was definitely a play on Lois Lane, and how I think she's a journalist, right? In the didn't she work
I thought she was a
for?
real estate
Oh, that's right. She works
Yeah.
agent.
in real
Yeah.
estate.
Yeah.
She's not a journalist, but she does investigate Omni Man,
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. She
and
does a
her
lot of
that's
that.
her whole entire subplot is
Yeah.
her investigating with like the bloody costume and like talking to people and talking to Cecil, like all behind Omni Man's back.
There was something that hit me pretty hard when like you see Omni Man and his wife like in their relationship, like their family dynamic, like it's like an all-American family, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that point at the end where he was telling Mark, he's like, the way I loved your mother was more of like a pet. And I was like, oh God, that's gotta sting so bad
Yeah. Yeah. And
as a
she hears it
pet.
too. She hears it
Yeah,
and
she
reacts to
hears it.
it. Yeah. That's rough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like even more than the Mark character, the mom, the Debbie character is like the relatable character for the audience. Like that's our entryway into this story, right? Because she doesn't have powers and she's just trying to figure this out like we are, right? And yeah, yeah, a very powerful character for sure.
What do you
And
guys
also,
think? Oh, go
oh,
ahead.
I was gonna say also like one thing that made like I was like thinking about is like how many times in a superhero comic show movie do they focus on the mom? Like you like almost always with superhero characters, their mom and dad are dead.
Yeah.
With like every character, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Iron Man, like all of their parents are dead, or like that, or like one of them's dead, or they had to live with the different like. There's always like a surrogate parent, maybe, but you never just have mom and dad unless they were like already previous, like say like John Kent or something like that, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you mentioned surrogate parent. I thought that the mom was going to be more like an Aunt May kind of character. She might like be in trouble. They might have to save her later in the season, but definitely not. Like you're saying, Christian, she became more of like a Lois Lane kind of character who is like definitely more involved in the story and like the investigation of things. So that was kind of cool to see. So, what do you guys think about the high school dynamic? Definitely got some like, you know, Peter and MJ and Gwen Stacy and Flash Thompson kind of vibes at the high school, right? Um, yeah, how did that all go for you? Did you find you were like, let's move away from this, let's get into the superhero stuff, or was that interesting to you guys?
Hmm. I do think it was a little like, it was probably a little weaker than I think the family dynamic. Like some of the high
Yeah,
school stuff. Like Amber was all right, I think. I thought it was kind of weird when like she gets really mad at Mark for like leaving to go fight the guy, you know, that was like that was attacking like the campus they were at. But then like she already like a scene or two later, she already says that she knows Mark is invincible and figured it out already.
yeah,
And so I was like, oh, that was kind of confusing. So that I feel like that was a little inconsistent. Um, and so like some of the school characters besides Adam Eve were like kind of like a little underdeveloped. but I didn't mind it. I did kind of enjoy those parts, and like they kind of tapped into that kind of more Spider-Man vibe, and it's cool to see him like try to balance his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I I I mean, I'm such an old man. I feel so far removed from like what high school relationships are like. So maybe that's why I glossed over that part so much. But like, yeah, definitely like Mary Jane and Peter vibes. It was interesting to see that, like, that I mean that it's almost just like repackaging Peter Parker and Mary Jane,
Yeah.
but like you see the extent to which Mark is trying to like hide his identity to the point where it's just completely obvious, like we see it. And I think we, for the most part, see his girlfriend see it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That seemed kind of like a minor part of the big of like the bigger picture.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you guys. It was kind of cool to see like another cool superhero trope shown in a pretty cool way, like the superhero, the high school teenage angst stuff. But yeah, it all kind of took a backseat to the main storylines. And yeah, like you were near, I was kind of thinking the same thing. Like, am I just like too old to relate to these kind of stories? Because man, you touched upon it a little bit, Christian, but I could not stand Amber. Like, I was like, what the fuck? Like, why are you so angry at Mark all the time? Like, he can do no right to you, right? I just didn't get it. I found myself like really like disliking her.
Yeah, it did get annoying. I agree with that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just as we get older, just teenagers make less and less sense to us or something. But I don't know. Yeah. But she was very inconsistent. I mean, just her reactions to things, like, I don't know. There was no logic to it. Maybe that's the point. She's a teenage girl. There's not a whole lot of logic going on, like, in general, I guess. But yeah, she bugged me. She rubbed me the wrong way.
What do you guys think of Mark Hamill's character, that Taylor that made Omni Man an invincible suit? I think he pretty much makes like every superhero suit, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
It's the impression
Yeah.
I got. I
Or
thought that was very much in vein of like the Kingsman, or
yeah.
even Edna Mode from Invincible, oh my god, the Incredibles.
that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, another superhero trope. You got to have, the guy behind the scenes helping out, right? Whether it's like Micro helping out the Punisher, or like Ned in the Spider-Man movies, like the dude in the chair or whatever. It's like, yeah, it's cool to see like they honored that archetype as well, and to have Mark Hamill be the voice was pretty badass.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought that was a cool question. Like, if you became a superhero, how would you design your own suit? And I like how he answered that. He's like, "Well, what's your superhero name?"
Mm-hmm. And he wants something iconic.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool. Even though this has this old school 2D animation look to it, like we've been talking about, it has a lot of like realism to it. Like the violence is much more realistic than Marvel and DC comics, right? If Superman's gonna punch a dude, it's more likely going to be like what we see in the show than what we actually see in Superman comics, right? And same thing with this guy, right? The fact that he's like a professional superhero costume maker, that makes sense. He's the guy to go to. Like, it never made sense with Spider-Man comics or Spider-Man movies that Peter Parker would create his own costume. Like, I guess in Homecoming, they kind of play with that, right? It's like a kind of shitty costume that he creates. But in like the first Raimi Spider-Man, like this regular, pretty smart, obviously, but basically a regular high school student creates this like incredible costume. Like, how the fuck did he do that, right? And you're given no explanation. So this is, I feel like, a more realistic take, right? There's an actor, there's a guy you go to for this kind of thing. That's kind of cool.
I do have an appreciation for like the Sam Raimi, like the original costume that Peter Parker put together, and then like the original costume that Peter Parker put together in the MCU. How it's just like a hoodie and like sweatpants. It's just
Yeah.
like you're on a shoestring budget. Like you're not a professional cosplayer. That's what you're gonna build. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
do
it's
have a
something a high
respect for
school
that.
kid would make, you know.
Yeah. See, that's exactly my thought. Like, okay, if he's like a rich kid, maybe he can make it happen somehow. But we know that Peter Parker doesn't have money. Like, how the hell did he create that first costume in Spider-Man 1? You're given like no indication how he came up with that, right? So it's kind of silly. And yeah, like the homecoming costume, the initial one makes a lot more sense. And the subsequent one, right? When Tony Stark is funding your new costume, then okay, yeah, I get it.
Mhm.
So what else? Yeah, we've talked quite a bit about like what we enjoyed. Anything come up short for you guys on this show? Like I mentioned, the Amber character was like a kind of a low point for me. What about you guys? Anything could have been done better,
Mm.
you think?
Oh, I got something. So, what did you guys think about the actual quality of the animation? Did you guys notice, like, was that good? Was that good for you guys? Like, did you guys notice any like stiffness or any like just stiffness is the word I'm looking for? Because I noticed that it definitely looked a lot stiffer than
Mhm.
say like Castlevania or like other animated shows, Rick and Morty. You know.
Did it look
Yeah.
stiff? That's an interesting question. I mean, it felt pretty fluid to me for the most part. I guess maybe
Okay.
because I wasn't specifically looking for that. But I also am wondering if that's the look they were going for.
It could have been like I definitely got flashback at like watching like a lot of like older anime. What I'll notice is that when they want to choreograph a scene, the animation will be very fluid, and then for everything else, they'll just have people like kind of just standing in place, like still frames with just mouths moving to kind of
Mm.
save on budget and like move as least as possible. And so I definitely noticed that here. There were some parts that I was like, "Oh, that looks a little too rough." Personally, um, but I also watch like a lot of animation, so like it's just I don't know if that's something I may have picked up on. I don't know. Did you guys pick up on that at all, or?
Yeah, kind of what Rainier was saying. I feel like maybe it was almost on purpose. Like I did notice a little stiffness here and there, but I think they were kind of going for that. They were kind of going for the glitchy, sort of flawed, old school animation look and feel of things. And overall, like I dug that. You know, like I enjoyed seeing that. There were some splashes of like more like modern animation where they like kind of amped it up a bit. I kind of wish they didn't do that though, because then it kind of took away from the old school feel, right? It kind of took me away from that like retro feeling. So yeah, I'm almost thinking I wish it was a little more stiff and glitchy than the final product, which was maybe a little bit too glossy and sparkly for me at times.
Oh,
When I think of
Alrighty.
stiff and glitchy, Super Friends comes to mind. Is that like
Yeah.
your frame of
mm-hmm.
reference?
Oh, that's totally what I'm talking
Okay.
about. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, like that.
Where it's
I
like
mean,
just an
it's
arm is moving.
yeah, the arms or maybe the mouths are like out of sync or something, Yeah. And like, oh, one thing I noticed on this show that I definitely notice in like old school animation is like kind of the over overly done reactions that the characters have. Like if this was like live action, the director would be cut. No, you're overdoing it. Like, make it more subtle, like tone it down. But yeah, that's just like, the old school nature of things. Like when you're a kid watching these characters, like they can't be the gestures and the behaviors can't be too subtle, right? They have to make it kind of overacting, and I did see that here. So that was pretty nice to see.
Oh, you guys had a much more positive outlook than me, I guess. But hey, that's good. That's good.
Do you guys
I'm
think
glad that
this
was just me.
show? Do you guys think this show would have worked as a live action versus an animated series?
Hmm.
Do you think it would have had as much as an
That's a
impact?
good question.
You know, this might lead into our next topic pretty well, but I feel like they've kind of already made the live action version of this show, and it's called The Boys, right? You know what I mean? I think it'd be too similar to The Boys if they made this a live action show, right? Like a violent superhero deconstruction live action show. Like, yeah, there already exists one of those, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like
Yeah, that's true.
I want to say it won't work. When you think of like the overall world of Invincible, how there's like Martians and there's a lot of space, and there's an episode where there's like a giant like this like giant alien invasion, and at the end you see like Omni Man go through this portal and just completely destroy the entire planet. And there's a lot of things I thought I feel like with a live action budget you probably couldn't do as much
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
or like that cat beast character that shows up,
Yeah.
like whereas
The cat, that's the one that they pump with steroids, right? And like, is that the one you're talking about?
I think so, the guy with like the big mace, who was like working for the crime boss.
Yeah.
The one that almost killed Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you make that in a live action show? Yeah. And not to mention,
I guess if the boys could do it.
I guess so. True.
But not to mention the big like Cthulhu creature they fight late in the season, right? Like that's a pretty big budget ask right there also. So that's a good point. Yeah, like budget wise, it just you can't really make this show unless you have like huge deep pockets.
Yeah. Like I feel like if you had like a Marvel budget, you know, you could make it work. If you had like the Marvel movie budget, you know.
Mm-hmm. And there's the conundrum. Disney would never make this show. Right?
Yeah. This is
not happening. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about superhero deconstruction a bit. So I mentioned how this show resembles The Boys in a lot of ways, right? So yeah, maybe that's a nice comparison. This show versus The Boys versus Watchmen, right? These are three like superhero deconstruction franchises. How do they compare to each other? Preferences, you know, this sort of thing. What do you guys think?
I'm actually still stuck on your comment about The Boys and Invincible. If it were live action, that it would basically be the same show. I don't actually, now that I think about it, I don't know, because the thing is like we know about Compound V, right, with The Boys. Whereas like Invincible, we have aliens and other dimensions and cyborgs, and I think there's differences. I feel like for a second I was thinking, oh, maybe it is an extension of like The Boys, but maybe not.
Yeah, that's a solid point. Like on the surface level, there are a lot of similarities. It's an ultra violent superhero story, but that's maybe where the similarities end, right? Like with The Boys, the protagonists are not super powered, right? Whereas with Mark here, he's one of the most powerful beings in the universe, right? So yeah, it is different. I agree. Good point. But I would still say that both stories are what we would consider superhero deconstructions, and I would say the Watchmen stories are as well. So how do they all fit together? You know, like, what do you guys think?
Okay. So Henry, have you finished The Boys?
I have
I don't want to
not.
like accidentally spoil
I actually just
anything.
finished. Are you talking about season two or? I just finished
Um,
season two actually.
I get, okay, so I've seen all of the like season 1 and 2.
Yeah, I've just
Um,
seen season one.
okay.
Yeah.
So I won't spoil anything of season 2 or try my hardest not to. Um, but I would say with like Watchmen and The Boys is that they feel a lot more political. Like with Watchmen, you have the Vietnam War, and you have like I think Richard Nixon like stays president a long time in the world
Yeah.
of the Watchmen,
Yeah.
and like Watchmen's very light on action, which is very subversive, and like with the big monster at the end. And the boys, of course, you have like the corporation that's controlling them, Vought, and how that almost like kind of mimics like Disney, and how there's like two sides to the heroes where like they have this like outward persona and then who they really are behind closed doors. And so I think with this show, it it doesn't really have, or at least what we've seen so far. Like I said, I have not read the comics, but the world is definitely much more fantastic with those. Whereas in the other ones, you only have like a couple like little fantastic elements here and there. Whereas this one, you have like aliens and invasions and several different powers that aren't like completely traced to one specific source. And I would say it's more about like character actions in this show. It's more about like taking certain tropes and like subverting them with different character actions rather than like using its subversions to hand you like a specific like message. Whereas like The Boys definitely has something more socio-political to say. Same with Watchmen. Whereas it seems like I don't really get that as much from Invincible. Not that that's a bad thing, but I think it uses its subversion in like a different way. You know, that's my take.
Well, super solid. I think you nailed it right there, Christian. Yeah, I do agree that um, while you can consider all three of these a version of superhero deconstruction, they're all very different and have different appeal factors and tell ultimately very different stories for sure. Okay, hey, so this show has already been renewed for two more seasons. Seasons 2 and 3 are greenlit. What do you guys think is next for Invincible? Any thoughts there?
Ooh. I feel like whatever I'm gonna say, I'm gonna get like completely wrong because I haven't read the comics.
Yeah. Oh,
I
that
mean,
I guess we should note that like none of us have read the Invincible comics. Like I haven't. Is that the same for you guys?
Yeah,
yeah.
same. Have not touched any of
Okay,
them.
so we're it's kind of fair game. We have no expectations there, right? Um, so yeah, our predictions are genuine and fresh, right? Untainted. Yeah, Christian, you were about to say something. You had some predictions.
Let's see. Okay. So there were definitely like kind of a bunch of stories that kind of went throughout season 1 that that kind of left on like a bit of a cliffhanger that I think they're gonna follow up a little more on season 2, such as the mob boss storyline with that Luke Cage like character.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's that episode where Mark goes to Mars and it kind of ends with like the Martians being taken over by that it was like that parasite like creature.
Oh
So I
yeah.
think those will kind of come back and develop a little more. I have a feeling we probably won't. We might not see Omni Man season 2. That's my guess. Or if we do, it'll be like towards the end. And I think we might see more Viltrum like as a whole, maybe another Viltrumite or something like that.
Oh, that's a pretty solid take. Yeah, I definitely feel like we haven't seen the last of Omni Man, But the fact that they mentioned they're doing season 2 and 3, yeah, it might be a case where we don't see him in season 2 at all, or maybe just at the very end, and then we see like the primary continuation of his story in season 3. I could see that. And then yeah, the fact that there are tons of Viltrumites out in the universe, yeah, that kind of makes you feel like, okay, we're the fact that we've only seen Omni Man and Invincible and none other, right? If I feel like, okay, we're probably going to see some more upcoming in some way. Yeah, I totally agree. What about you, Rainier? Any thoughts about the future of Invincible?
I mean, I think some of the low-hanging fruit would be Invincible possibly going to Viltrum, seeing that side of his world. I don't know. I think Omni Man could come back. Because he left, and
Yeah,
that's there. I think I don't know, maybe we'll see something with Invincible. I think something with Invincible and Adam Eve. I mean, they should have been boyfriend and girlfriend from the beginning.
right.
But who knows? But yeah, not sure where else it's gonna go. I mean, there's so many characters.
Yeah.
We'll probably see more of what's the name of that guy that turned the robot that turned into a human again? Was he the robot? I can't forget his name.
Robot. That was his name.
Yeah, his name was literally Robot. But I guess
yeah.
when he became human, his name was Rudy. Rudy. Yeah.
That was an interesting transition, seeing his character like clone himself, and he's like, you're not you're basically making a copy, and you're just I'm gonna die. And I'm like, well, that's pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, go live your life to the fullest, the ultimate like Hail Mary.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of like awesome voice casting, the robot character is voiced by Zachary Quinto, who played Spock, right? So you talk about perfect casting. This robot character is a robot, so he had like this emotionless side to him, like Spock, but also like Spock, you find out he's actually part human after all, right? So like it's just like 100% nailed it with the casting there, and that goes for like so many of the characters in this show.
I'm also curious, like, is Mark going to continue into college? Like, are they going to follow that part of his life?
Oh yeah. So yeah, you're bringing up a lot of Peter Parker type stuff, right? In the comics, we see Peter Parker go to college, etc. And then yeah, the Adam Eve thing too. I could totally see that continuing on. So they sort of touched upon this like love triangle thing, very Peter, Gwen, MJ thing going on. And I could see that like continuing on throughout the future seasons also. Totally.
Yeah. And we haven't even seen like the personal lives of all the other characters from Teen Team,
Mm-hmm.
So there's that.
Yep, they could definitely go deeper with those guys. Okay, rating time. Out of 5 stars, what would you give season 1 of Invincible? How about you, Christian?
Ooh, all right. So I've been really thinking about giving it a 5. I think it hits a lot of like really high notes within it, between like the very stellar voice cast. I loved the soundtrack. While not every like writing beat hit for me, I think the ones that hit really hit. I really enjoyed the level of violence. I would say that like I said, the animation looked a little rough for me at times. But hey, that could also be just me. So I'd say 5, maybe 5, 4.5, like is where I'm at.
Cool. How about you, Rainier?
I mean, I'm definitely going to pick up the comic. I want to see how it translates, and I can't imagine that they deviated from the source material too differently. So for that aspect alone, I'm giving it a 5. Like it's a cool show. I want to see where it goes.
Hey, that's kind of a cool gauge. How much do you want to go read the comics? Like that's kind of a good factor in rating a show or a movie, right? I'm curious about the comic too. Um, but yeah, I don't think I enjoyed this show quite as much as you guys. I'd mentioned earlier, I thought the violence was a little bit too gratuitous. Maybe more important than that, though, is I didn't think there was a huge fun factor to the show. Um, there is a comedic vibe to it, but it's very darkly comedic, right? It's on the dark side, maybe too much so. And yeah, and bottom line is maybe I just couldn't quite get over the blood and guts of it all. It's weird because I'm by no means like a person who is turned off by violence. Like some of my most favorite movies of all time are very violent. We're talking Quentin Tarantino. I love that stuff, right? There's something about this show that just, I just, it was hard for me to take. And yeah, we keep going back to it, but just the look of the show versus the violence of the show, just it was kind of a lethal combination for me, I guess. I'm still gonna give it a recommendation. It's definitely worth seeing. Like um, when all my homies were telling me you got to see this show, I feel like, yeah, I had to see the show, and it was a cool experience to go through. But yeah, ultimately more of a mild recommendation. So I'm going to go 3 out of 5 for Invincible. So recommendations across the board. If you haven't seen Invincible, go check it out. And with that, we can wrap up the episode. This is farewell from Christian, Rainier, and Henry.